What's shaking booktube? My name's Cam, welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for checking in, brothers, sisters, shithead cats who accidentally stepped on the keyboard. I appreciate it. Thanks for checking in for a rather cynical video today. This is 5 shitty books that I'm actually throwing out. I've got a bunch of books I need to load up into the bookshelf and I need to make some room, so I figured I would toss some out, some of the older books that I didn't really enjoy, and I figured why not make a video out of it. So yeah, these are 5 books that I just found plain shitty. See you on the other side of the intro. Roll it! Well, how the tables have turned around. I could give the disclaimer about how these are just my personal opinions and it may not be how you feel, and I don't mean any disrespect, blah blah blah. But really, as common sense should prevail, you should know that coming into the video anyway, although I have kind of just said that disclaimer now anyway. Okay. Hey, I want to ask you guys a favor. If you aren't already, do you mind, if you have a Twitter account of course, go on Twitter, follow me there, because that's actually where I'm most active socially, and I would like to interact with people more often, people that watch my channel and want to talk about books and want to talk about writing as well. I would love to be more interactive with the booktube community and the writing and reading community, so I would appreciate it if you gave me a follow on Twitter, which you'll find below. Yeah, so anyway, these 5 books, I'm not going to literally just throw them in the trash. I don't want to be wasteful. I'll probably give them to charity, or I don't know, I'll find them a new home. I'm sure there'll be other people that might enjoy them more than I did. One man's trash is another man's bread. The first one I'm going to mention is 3 Dark Crowns. The premise of 3 Dark Crowns actually sounds pretty good. It's meant to be about 3 sisters that have grown up as royalty in separate ends of this universe, I guess you could say, this world. And the idea is that they battle themselves to be the actual queen. Well, they battle each other, and as a standard YA book, they each have their own kind of ability or their own power. There's Mirabella, who I think, if I remember right, she controlled fire. Catherine, the poisoner, who's resistant to poison and uses poison in her fighting. And then Arsinoe, who has a certain amount of ability over plants and the power to manipulate plants and wildlife. So the premise sounded good, it sounded interesting, but to summarize quickly why I didn't like this book, it just kind of fell flat for me. It felt like Kendall Blake had pumped in as many cliches as she could manage. It's filled with YA cliches, right down to the love triangle even. And it all builds towards something that was meant to be the main selling point of the book, and that was the battle between the 3 sisters, and it doesn't even happen. At least not in this book. I get if it's meant to be a series, it would be hard to, climax with that battle and go from there, but maybe it's not meant to be a series. Anyway, there's a lot more I could say on this, and there's a lot more I actually have said in, I think it was the first drunk book review I did ages ago. So if you want some more specific deets as to why I didn't really like this book, you can click up there. Next up was one I listened to via audiobook for the book club Read, React, Repeat, and that was Raven Boys. Again, to go into detail, you could watch the live stream we did for Read, React, Repeat up there on Raven Boys, but to summarize, it was boring. The characters to me were either unlikable or unmemorable. If there were no characters that I found likable, and it's not that I found them all unlikable, it's just that the majority of them just felt like side characters that were getting a bit more spotlight than they were meant to. Even the protagonist felt like a side character to me because she seemed so plain. The main driving point of the book was that one day she'll kiss her love and that will kill her love, and that's kind of what the book's sold on. And then there's all this other stuff about them being able to see ghosts and basically being psychic. But the main driving point was that she would kiss her love and kill her love, and that point, and I read a fair bit of this book before I DNF'd it. It's one of the only books I have DNF'd. So that was meant to be the main driving point, and that point actually had little to no impact on anything important that happened in the book up to where I read up to. The idea that the book had been sold on had pretty much no importance on the events that were happening in the story, up to at least halfway, which in my opinion is much too far into the book for that main driving point to actually play a part in the story. Anyway, it was boring, I couldn't get into it. More deets in the live stream. Segueing from that one was another one we actually did in the live stream, so once again you can find more details up there, but this one was pretty disappointing. I felt rather betrayed. And that's because I watched the movie before I read the book, and I loved the movie. I loved it. I mean, the movie actually didn't get very good critical acclaim, but I loved it. I even loved Brendan Fraser in it, which, again, is a rather unpopular opinion, although he's kind of become a meme nowadays. Like, it's a meme to love Brendan Fraser. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Anyway, if it's not obvious already, the book is Inkheart. I love the movie, but the book was just a whole lot of running back and forth between locations. Most of the book was actually traveling or being transported after being kidnapped. It was just, there wasn't a whole lot of action. You might not expect there to be a whole lot of action in a story about a dad and his daughter who have the ability to read stuff into reality, but I feel like there was a lot of room for it, especially if the movie was able to fill in some gaps there as to where it was lacking in action. Plus, the villain seemed like a bit of a dickhead, and I don't mean, obviously a villain's meant to look like a dickhead, but this one just didn't seem that intimidating in the book rather than the movie. And in the movie, he's played by, is Andy Serkis, the guy who played Gollum, so I would say that's saying something, but he's actually a brilliant actor, so yeah, okay. After that, I had a book called What Milo Saw. What Milo Saw is essentially a book about a boy who has retinitis pigmentosa, which is like you're looking through a tiny little hole constantly until the point where he's actually going to go blind. He has a pet pig, and he loves his grandma very much. His grandma goes into a nursing home. The nursing home warden there, I guess you could call her, is very cruel to the elderly patients, so him as a child tries to unravel it or try to expose her. Along the way, he makes a few friends. His mum tries to deal with the fact that the dad left with a younger, more pretty woman. He meets a refugee who I think is illegally in the country, but trying to look for his little sister, who is also a refugee. And yeah, it all just culminates, and it sounds like a good idea. It sounds brilliant. There's a lot of heartwarming potential in there, but my problem with this is that a lot of the heartwarming bits were a bit too on the nose. I'm all for diversity and including people like refugees in stories. I think that's a brilliant idea. It should happen more often. But in this one, it felt like in certain instances, it only happened so people could be like, oh, that's so wonderful that the writer put that in there. Right down to quirky things that just had no point in being in the story. Maybe this is just because I'm an Australian, but is it normal to have a pet pig? Because that wasn't explained in the book as being anything other than, oh, he just has a pet pig. Everyone was kind of cool with that. Like, he walked around with it like it was a dog. He took it everywhere with him, and it was just... It felt like it was another quirk put into the story for no real reason. The ending was entirely predictable, although I won't say what happened. I'm sure you can imagine from what I've told you what would happen. It was an entirely predictable and kind of cliche book. Not really cliche, I mean, the stuff in this is rather unique, but it was done in a way that just felt like it was an attempt to grab some extra votes for being diverse. And last up is a book called Heartstone. It is a brick of a book. Now, C.J. Sansom is actually a really good writer, but the thing with this book is that it's sold kind of as a fantasy action. Well, actually, not even fantasy, really. It dabbles in semi-historic realism. And it's not even necessarily a bad book, I didn't enjoy this because it was sold as something it's not. I won't read out the synopsis, but the synopsis does make it sound a bit more action-packed and adventurous than it is. It's mostly just a political book about... It's about the more political side of the of Henry VIII's invasion of France. It's just not entirely interesting for someone who's not a super history buff, although sometimes I can get into those things. It's not for me. And it was recommended to me, and it's kind of sold to me as something it's not. But I'm sure someone will get some enjoyment out of that. Steve Donahue type, I imagine. Anyway, there you have it. 5 shitty ass books. No, I'm sorry, that's really harsh. I probably shouldn't call them shitty. I don't mean to disrespect the authors, I really don't. It's just, like I said, one man's trash is another man's garlic bread, and yeah, wasn't for me. These books were not my garlic bread. Put that on a shirt. As always, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, join the Wolfpack and subscribe. If you are in the Wolfpack, I'll see you in the next video. Catcha.